Okay, hi, we're back. We are back for the afternoon sessions, and we have just starting here in a few minutes with the first U.S. panel, which is called Meet the Accelerators. And the idea here was to focus on a few companies in East Coast U.S. who are working with technology companies and other companies who are using some technology from Central East Europe. And the accelerators and incubators in the US are often the gatekeepers to companies who get funding from VCs for startups and scale-ups, and they very quickly need some programming help, some software development help, and the Central European companies can be a wonderful source for that. There are even some companies in Central Europe who specialize precisely in only that particular type of segment. So without further ado, we're going to jump over to the first panel with Armen Kherlopian and Ashish Bisaria. So I will take a break, join you in 1 second on the other stage. See you then. Bye. Great. We are on. So we're on for the U.S. panel. It's called Meet the Accelerators, and 2 discussions or presentations today. First one will be from Ashish Bisaria, right here now on the screen with us today. You're in Atlanta right now, right?
Yes, that's where I am.
Yes, and he is the global head of CX at FirstSource, $700-800 million Indian company with operations kind of globally, but not particularly yet in Central Europe, which is perhaps one of the reasons you're here today. And then I think during the course of this next 10 minutes, Armen Kherlopian from Genpact will join us as well. But without further ado, Ashish, can you introduce yourself and your company? And do you have a presentation today?
I do.
Great.
4 or 5 slides, we'll get started. But hi, this is Ashish Bisaria. I'm the global head for customer experience. And we as FirstSource are a traditional BPO company that looks at clients US, UK based. And we serve them out of the US, UK, India, and the Philippines market. We're about 22,000 people strong. As Tom mentioned, we are headquartered out of India, listed on the Indian Stock Exchange. Now, the area that I wanted to use today's conversation was around how is artificial intelligence playing in the space of customer experience. And I talk about client-facing functions, and if one was to think about them truly, it's where human-to-human interactions are happening. Now, this could be the front desk of a bank or a hotel lobby, but it can also be how you interact with humans over the phone, web chat, messaging, and things like that. And the fundamentals around customer experience, at the end of the day, is based upon the idea of a conversation or communication. And this is a very famous quote that often we believe that a communication has taken place when it really hasn't. What the clients
wise words. Yes.
And when clients are expecting, when they are asking for help for topic A, they're hearing about topic B, and so on and so forth, right?
It reminds me a little bit of the so-called Chinese whisper. When you tell one person, it goes around and ends up being completely something else.
That is spot on, Tom. That is exactly how we feel sometimes. So the question then is, how do we drive better engagement and communication? And does AI have a role in it? And I'm only going to focus on that one topic. But let's start with it, right? What are the fundamentals, right, Tom? We talk about a good client-facing business should have conversation between 2 people. And conversation is a dialogue, right? It has to be personalized. We don't want to be treated like yet another number or just one other client. We want it to be personal. At FirstSource, we talk about moments that matter. It's a philosophy that we care about the most. And in the moments that matter, do we have all the facts so that I can take care of you and your needs the right way. Good conversations need to be easy. And at the end of the day, satisfactory conclusions should be achieved. And we look at these 5 principles and ask the question, are we structuring our business to do it better? So if I was to double click, Tom, on this conversation topic, here's what we say are the attributes of a great conversation. At the core of it, it's a dialogue. It's a dialogue between 2 people, and that dialogue can happen over phone, over email, communication back and forth, over a chat, over messaging. The skill that we are looking for from a FirstSource employee is our ability to actively listen, empathize with the client, and be respectful. We look for those skills, we hire for those skills, we train for those skills. The style that we are looking for is that the conversation is clear. And when I need to know more, I'm curious and I'm probing for the right things. And this is where, going back to my opening statement, Tom, was the illusion happens when we think we are asking the right question, but we are really not paying attention to the customer's need and want and reacting to a script or our predefined position without probing. And the outcome that we always look for is a clear understanding and a conclusion, as I talked about. So question for us, and the topic we wanted to involve the audience was, does AI have a role in making this part of the value better? And here's how we think about it, right? Do we really want to change human-to-human conversation in the future and make it human to machine or human to robot? And I don't think so we are ready for that. At the end of the day, humanity exists because we like the interaction. So when it comes to the dialogue, we do not look at AI for any reason. We want to have human-to-human conversation be natural. But if you look at the part of active listening, and it's a skill that we often struggle with in our personal and professional life both, we leverage AI technology to help listen. So if you think about a voice conversation, the technology has reached a stage where I can do voice-to-text translation in real time, and within that text, then do contextual understanding, natural language understanding, and prompt the agent in case the agent wasn't paying attention. And there's a huge role we think about AI play there. Empathy and respect is a human trait, and we do not want AI to get into it. Now, can you feign empathy and respect? Yes. If it's an email conversation, if it's a chat conversation, you can tune your systems to respond empathetically, but it still doesn't come across as genuine as a human-to-human reaction could be. But the area where we really spend time is making the agent clearly understand the request, ask the right questions. If you're not paying attention to the subtleties of the conversation, AI can help clarify that with the idea that we have enhanced understanding at the end of the day. And the way this all looks together from an agent desktop agent conversation is that the AI tool helps give context, which would either give a recommendation to the agent to say, do this, ask this, don't do this, offer this, those kind of recommendation that makes the conversation more personal. Options that I may have missed. If you're in travel industry and somebody's asking for a travel option to travel to an island, I can react only to the question asked, or I could suggest options that are comparable and maybe better. Advice is the other part. We use AI engine to advise the agent what to do on behalf of the client. Rather than expect our agents to remember all the policies, the processes, their training, which we know after 4 weeks of training, 90% of that is forgotten, we use AI to help the agent remember the right things at the right moment. And the most important part is the next best action. the more I can help with that, the more efficient the conversation becomes. And the bottom line of all this is, Tom, what we say is, let the human, let the FirstSource employee be focused on the interaction and the conversation. Mm-hmm. And the thinking part, the decisioning part, the next action, prompted on the screen so that they can continue creating the interaction on an empathetic and a personal curiosity level, and the technology helps make it better. That's broadly our ideology and philosophy, the way we go about thinking. I'd love to talk more about this, use examples, but I wanted to use this as the setup stage to say where we are triangulating on AI within our business model.
Okay. And we're going to see if Armen is going to join us right now, also on stage. Ashish, tell us a bit about, I assume you're developing all of this probably in India for the most part, right?
So we've done it in two ways. There are some homegrown proprietary tools we've built, given that we've been doing this for 20 years, this business model. So there is some level of internal tools. But we also know, at the end of the day, there are hundreds of technology companies that are really good and really relevant in focusing and researching in this always changing space. And we love to partner with them. There are companies not only who are good at AI, but they've built expertise in a certain domain, whether it's banking, whether it's insurance, collection. So we do a healthy mix of partnerships and homegrown solution. Here's probably the bottom line. We are trying not to invest too many R&D dollars with homegrown tools all the time because of the ever-changing need of technology. And this is where partnerships really help.
Okay. And to kind of a leading question, are you guys looking for partnerships in Central Europe? Is that something you would do? You seem to have a strong footprint in the US, of other parts of Asia, but you seem to have a bit of a hole in Europe. Is that the case, or is that too strong for me to say such a thing?
No, Tom, I think your assessment broadly is right. So we are looking at Central Europe in two different lenses. The first lens, which is very logical for us, is a delivery location and a delivery site. So European languages can easily be supported. We have quite a lot of customers in UK or in the Europe market. And looking at Central Europe delivery sites is a part of our strategy. But B, we know that Central Europe also has a strong technology center. There are companies that are coming up with innovative solutions. And we'd be very interested in learning about these companies, what they are doing, and see how we can partner.
Okay, great. So we're going to come back to you in a few minutes, but let's try to get Armen to pop in. I see you're on the screen, Armen. You were there. Maybe you're back. Hopefully you're coming back. Armen is the Chief Science Officer at Genpact, and he's the director of the BAJ Accelerator in New York City. And we hope he'll tell us a bit about both of those. So Armen, over to you to give us a bit of intro of who you are and a bit about what you're doing for Genpact and also about the BAJ Accelerator program. And the floor is yours. And thank you for joining us.
Absolute pleasure to be here, Tom, and most delighted. You know, in terms of one thing we are seeing, and one item that is systematic across startups, is that the ability to interact with large enterprise, you have by definition a mismatch in size. A startup is fledgling. It is on the order of few people, tens of people. In my industry posts, having served as a senior technical leader for 10,000 staff out of a 100,000 person organization, I've repeatedly seen startups struggle with things like culture, going under the burden of a large contracting process, and also not understanding the criticality of how the startups offer product service must fit into large enterprise processes. And those processes are varied, whether it's from understanding when you can invoice properly, the price point, the feature complexity, what's actually driving value. So with our accelerator, the BAJ Accelerator, we hosted at the Jacobs Technion Cornell Institute. Cornell University and Stanford University had a competition in New York. Cornell was able to edge out Stanford and win the technology campus in Manhattan. So there we welcome elite startups who are looking for rapid growth in the US. And we welcome them from many parts of the world. And Tom, as we connected, most delighted to articulate more.
Great. And I think that you have a program, is it next week or a couple of weeks coming up? Tell us a bit about that.
Yes, we have our next cohort is just coming up. So the website is BAJaccelerator.com, BAJ. And absolutely. And the subsequent one is in Q1 2021. So the activities there is connecting with mentors. For example, we have mentor associated with financial modeling, former CFO of Citigroup, so a leader of a 300,000 organization. And I find it's quite fun to see a CFO of Citigroup coaching a startup on financial modeling, but it's very, very powerful. Similarly, in terms of go-to-market, regulatory affairs, IP. And there, what the community is quite special. It leads to very strong investment rounds, leads to very strong business development, because we have a belief, my two partners with the accelerator, that startup represent an important force for good in the world. So we're delighted to help propel that.
That's awesome.
Thank you.
Armen, one of the things that this panel is meant to address is the theory that many of the companies, startups and scale-ups in the U.S. Who get funding then need to, on the basis of a concept, perhaps they don't even have a product yet, but a concept, a new app of some sort, and then they need to develop it very quickly. And of course, if they have X amount of money, they can extend the runway and the time they've got if they use that money wisely. And Central Europe, we've seen many examples of U.S. companies have built up really great companies on the back of Central European technology help. So are the accelerators in the U.S., let's just say East Coast incubators and some of those underlying companies that you might know, are they aware of the kind of Central European tech talent? And is that an opportunity that connecting those East Coast U.S. startups with Central European technology companies who can help them build their product?
Yeah, absolutely, Tom. And, there's increased awareness. And one of the challenges, though, is how do you dock a strong go-to-market team? Often a go-to-market organization will echo the culture of the buyer, wherever that is in the world. So that's one piece of the puzzle. And as you're highlighting, a critical piece of the puzzle is, proper engineering, very strong product. It's increasingly recognized that, you can do this in many parts of the world, and to do it at a high level of quality. And one thing I'll highlight, and this is really important, and we're seeing this across our many applicants, is that the bar for technology in a startup making a difference for customers is not zero. I mean, a single engineer can build an alpha prototype and test it with 100 users and then get live feedback. Like, that can happen in a few days. Like, long past are the times that an idea will just get funded. So, and I think, founders that have this mindset of, let me just get out there, de-risk the business by talking to my users, are that much more investable. And I think this specific point, Tom, is a great way to catalyze a whole set of new companies.
Armen, I have a question for you, Tom, if you don't mind.
Please.
So I'm based out of Atlanta, Armen, and Georgia Tech has a very good accelerator program.
Okay.
And we are also present in the Bay Area. Now, the thing we hear typically, and this is where, Armen, I'm trying to get your insights. The reason why Silicon Valley has been successful historically in coming up with these ideas very quickly is the culture over there is people will get together over coffee shop and aren't very hesitant in sharing how they would approach it. So people with different lenses collaborate very quickly. The criticism of the East Coast has been that people hold their ideas a little closer to their vest because they think sharing that with others might lead somebody else develop it rather than them. Have you experienced East Coast, West Coast differences in ideologies?
Sure, fantastic point, Ashish, and delighted to convey some insight. One item definitely, if we contrast even snapshots in time, in the year 2000, so we're discussing a few universities. Most universities in the year 2000 were quite hostile towards startups. It really took Stanford to give a black eye to the global universities, saying, actually, this is what the mission of the university is, to make society, improve. And that, what I'm conveying is there's a lead time. So in 2010, things like, if we look at life sciences, precision medicine uptook. Now in 2020, many universities have programs.
Yep.
Now, but to your point, Ashish, something is still lacking. And my time in the Bay in particular, my time in New York in particular, my time in innovation centers around the world is absolutely right. In the Bay, there is more, it is easier to be lucky. People are naturally communicating, there's investor infrastructure that is there, and there's a culture of quickly understanding what a startup does. What are the unit economics? What's the CAC? What's the customer acquisition cost? What's the customer lifetime value? That the ease and speed of that conversation doesn't happen in too many parts of the world. So that being said, it's shifting, it's growing. There is fatigue in the overpicked deals in the classic innovation centers. There's increased appreciation and investor demand for deals that are not so overpicked. The challenge, though, then comes to founder education to understand not a culture of startups, but a broader culture of startups, that it's about growth, it's about de-risking your business, and it's about making a difference for the world.
Yep, great point. Thanks, Armen.
And Ashish, speaking of that, so Atlanta, look at now the world's changing. COVID, people distributed working and remote working. Tell us about the tech scene in Atlanta. Is that robust? Is it booming? I mean, you mentioned Georgia Tech, the university is close by. Give us a bit of a feel for the environment there.
Yeah, Tom. So I think, and I'd probably pick what Armen's saying. Bay Area and the Silicon Valley is starting to get saturated. While the ideologies and the style is very conducive to entrepreneurs and accelerators, areas like Atlanta, which is a melting pot of 12 million people from all cultures and parts of the world, right, allows a city like ours to think about it. To Armen's point, now colleges are recognizing their value and their place in the sun. Georgia Tech, a premier technology institute, it just becomes logical. So the short answer is yes, we are starting to make Atlanta a decent hub for innovation. Here's the difference. We are still specializing in certain areas that this area is known for. So fintech has big presence in Atlanta. And you'll find a ton of innovation being directed towards companies that are based out of Atlanta. Nothing wrong with it. If you want to start somewhere, you might as well look for local companies where you can provide your products and services. Life sciences was the other thought that you brought up. Emory over here in Atlanta allows life sciences to happen. But if you look at the traditional technology companies, AI products, everything, they're still more limited in the Atlanta area. They have been more relegated to other parts of the country.
Okay. And in terms of Central European connections to Atlanta, for example, or East Coast in general, they aren't very deep. But do you think that there's space for different question? How would one from Central Europe develop a better relationship with accelerators, incubators on the East Coast, whether it's Atlanta or Boston or Charlotte or Raleigh, North Carolina?
Armen, I think you are better qualified in answering that question.
Thank you very much, Ashish. And it brings to mind a question I'll relay to you, Ashish, ties to multi-setted ties across the centers. And Tom, to this point, one is, I highlighted it previously, that a go-to-market organization will echo its customer. So an immediate bit of advice is, if you can land a customer in Boston, in Atlanta, in New York, in Chicago, wherever it happens to be, and try to learn from that customer in terms of culture, pain points, that is a real powerful way to start hiring as well, to continue the expansion. So treat that customer in that new environment, not just as a statistic, but also an opportunity to learn. The second item would be, for example, our accelerator. We specialize in helping cross that divide, namely how to craft the message, how to talk about the right KPIs, key performance indicators, and how the best of both worlds is possible. The strong engineering team at home, the go-to-market organization that is hybrid in culture. And that's really a powerful way to get to the global market. And Ashish, a question to you, as Emory, as you highlighted, Atlanta is quite formidable in terms of innovation area. What do you think is required? Is it more horizontal collaboration with the other cities on technology, or more vertical? Would love your perspective on this, because it informs startup strategy.
Yeah, I would say more horizontal, Armen. This is, so the little that I've played around with the accelerator companies over here, if you ask them, who else have you tried this with? Who else is working on it? You'll find it's the two people who are born and brought up in the South who got together on an idea and are double clicking down that way, right? And at some stage, I have to ask this question: while your idea for local market is good, not having that horizontal view, at least that's my initial reaction. And you're with Genpact, and here's the other thought it was playing in my mind. Organization like yours and ours, and we are a fifth of your size, so much smaller, we have access to multiple industries where we provide our services, and we see the challenges and the opportunities. But I don't see many incubators, innovation companies reaching out to us and saying, what do we know about these industry verticals? What are some of the pain points? And how can we create solutions based upon the insights of you? And I mean, we handle 300 million calls a year. So I say we have 300 million insights into what's broken in the business model. And companies companies in Europe should partner with us to understand what's broken and then create the solutions out of that.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Armen, in terms of other East Coast accelerators, incubators, tell me a bit more about their openness to partnering with European technology companies. Have you seen examples of that? Maybe in BAJ Accelerator, perhaps you've seen examples of a company that funded there that actually used technology from Armenia, for example, or from Poland or from Ukraine, whatever it might be, or others that you're aware of that might have tapped into that type of programming resource in Central Europe.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, just last week, we closed a world-class round for Scylla AI, SCYLLA. And I'll highlight, this as an example, and it relates to the critical point of valuation. So what I've seen, for example, I'm a member of New York Angels. I have been a guest at various angel communities around the world. And there's an implicit assumption for startups within any country. And that assumption is the valuation is either done assuming that there's only local investor access or there's global investor access. And it's quite a profound shift in terms of the value, the revenue momentum, the potential of that startup, if indeed it's a global startup, wherever it happens to be. So I highlight this in terms of Skyla because one was to view it as in one country, in this case, Armenia. The other way to view it, and this is what came to be, launched a center in Los Angeles, has developed the go-to-market team around New York, but its core, exactly as we're describing, has a world-class engineering team in Armenia. And we just had a tour de force round, led by Mucker Capital, who had a recent $4 billion exit with Honey to PayPal. We have the esteemed Elizabeth Yin, world-class investor of Hustle Fund. And then we rallied a set of angels. So a proper world-class venture round for a company that just happened to have an engineering core in Armenia. So I think there's a whole point of flipping the narrative of we have a point of strength wherever we come from, and we aspire and can be global. And that really takes access. Accelerators absolutely can help, but it's a frame of reference, and it ties to our earlier discussion on understanding the culture of what it means to be a startup and pertinent on the global stage.
And such a great point, Armen. And Tom, as a buyer community, I'm not starting by saying, where are you based, right? There are smart people across the globe. So just because you have your workforce either in India or in Central Europe or anywhere, that's not a starting point. Our starting point is what idea, what problem are you solving, right? And have you figured a way which is different than everything else? The challenge for us is we hear relatively the same approach or the same answer to the problem. And then the question will become is, okay, if your answer is the same as everything else I've heard, what is my risk profile as a buyer or working with somebody who's small with very low funding that I start building a solution and you can't afford to continue investing into weeks of development versus going with somebody who's relatively established, has the global presence, it's a safer bet. So we are always willing to partner, but we need to know your story and your approach is different than what we can buy from a global firm.
Okay. Armen, comments to your side?
No, I think Ashish hit that one out of the park.
Let's talk a bit about of course, COVID, not COVID itself, but the implications. And for big cities, obviously, been talked about a lot. But I'm also curious to see, I mean, that's an obvious topic, but I'm curious to see what you guys are seeing in terms of decentralized, away from big cities. Are there opportunities in smaller cities? Do you see, opportunities in countryside, small towns? I've been had a conversation a few days ago with shared service centers in U.S. and U.S. investors in Central Europe. They were talking about setting up shared service centers in U.S. in small towns in U.S. But just touch on a little bit of that in terms of not just the immediate things right now, but do you see that being a trend in the next 3, 4, or 5 years?
I'll get us started. Tom, at FirstSource, we talk about distributed workforce on our website, right? Did we have the capability and the ability to work at home, the infrastructure, the technology? Absolutely. But it was always a small part of the business model. It was on an as-needed basis. COVID just opened the door and challenged those assumptions to say you cannot be productive working from home or being in remote cities, right? It got challenged immediately, and we found that at the end of the day, if anything, our productivity were comparable or slightly better on output through a distributed workforce. So distributed workforce has become part of the model. It just requires a willing client to be open to the idea that your need should be the best talent matched to your need. Don't worry where they sit to your need, right? And the opening of talent to the need is becoming a better conversation than the city to the need.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more, Ashish. We have a few things underway. So there's the pandemic, and there's, in particular, transportation innovation. So in the pandemic, there's the joke that, who is responsible for innovation in an organization? Is it the chief information officer? Is it the chief technology officer? Or is it COVID-19? And Ashish, as you called out, immediate challenges to this idea of what it means to work from home. And many organizations are adapting, and many organizations will not go back. I mean, the pandemic has catapulted things like telemedicine, remote patient monitoring as a sub area, e-learning, whole industries, the venture community, the consulting community that was really about in-person sales and closing of deals has to adapt. And so if we take that acceleration plus things like autonomous vehicles, ride sharing, we're having definitely a shift where being the densest city is not the priority.
Yep.
So I think that opens up all sorts of opportunities around the world, that cities that were all of a sudden subscale are now in the ideal sweet spot for work. And we'll see that continue.
Okay. Ashish?
Yeah, and Tom, there was just using this example, and I know the data point is very small, but two of my friends have literally shut down their houses in the city, sold it. They've now taken a big RV with the best internet connectivity across the country, and they're like, we don't need to live in the same city and experience the same thing every day. I can be equally productive everywhere in the world, and they are literally gonna spend the next year all over US and Canada.
Very interesting. I had not heard that before. Very interesting. So permanently traveling. Okay, interesting. Armen, shifting it a little bit to slightly different topic. Central European technology companies looking for capital, not necessarily looking for clients, but in terms of looking for capital. Tell us a bit more about that and about valuations and about what they could be doing, should be doing, any advice, opinions, suggestions for technology companies here that are startup from the very beginning or scaling up. Give us some pearls of wisdom, as I was saying earlier.
Will do my best, Tom. And certainly this relates to the core item of what a startup founder is doing. In the early stage, it is really about trying to de-risk the business by product market fit. Now, that phrase is used all the time, almost to the level of a cliche, and what's under it is often lost. And critically under it is this idea that as an engine for growth, can someone, a customer, an investor, put $1 in and more than $1 comes out? So specifically, can $1 go in and there be an increased growth on users who are sufficiently retained and that have a sufficient lifetime value that it's time to scale up? And everything the startup should be doing, almost everything, should be trying to figure this out. Do I have the right distribution channels? Do I have a version of the product that once those come together, I could put in money and more money comes out? And like the focus on this very point, like the core activity of getting here, is often done in a somewhat casual way by founders. They're sort of in the operating motion, and there's an underappreciation that the investor is looking for a really strong signal that has come together. And what I see, and this relates to the cultural item, when many founders around the world are pitching, they miss this point. They miss this point that the investor will just say, okay, I'll just wait until you figure it out. And the founder is left there not quite sure what there's still to figure out. And there's all sorts of items in terms of this not being binary. Like you might have profitable growth at some point, but what happens if you're doing only ad marketing in a consumer play? Another company starts bidding against those words and your customer acquisition cost comes up. Do you have a referral program? Do you have a go-to-market organization that can account for that? And so this sort of like the diligence on unit economics, that moment in time for a company when it becomes highly investable, is something to plan for, to work toward, and to pitch against.
Okay, wise words, Ashish. Any opinions from your perspective?
No, I apologize. When it comes to investing, that's not my core competency.
Yes,
So
yes, fine. Any other questions, Armen or Ashish, you think that I should ask you or should have asked you? Because we've got about 4 minutes left. We're going to wrap up pretty soon. But you're on the call and you're probably expecting some questions from me. What did I not ask you that I should have asked you?
It's not what you should have asked, but here's the thought for the people who are listening and the companies in Central Europe trying to break it. I always tell them, think about jobs to be done. At the end of the day, what is the job that needs to be done? That's what resonates with us. Second, understand that there are certain companies who have access to all industries and sees the problems in that industry. Contact centers, customer service centers, customer complaint centers, whatever you call them, they are created to help with a problem that's broken in the system. And they're spending millions and millions of calls handling those problems. Jobs to be done with the problems that we are listening. When you combine the strength of those two, you can create a product that makes sense. If you're a small player, it would be tough for me to believe that you have the right capability to solve for it. This is where prototyping and accessing and partnering with companies like ours can help. I'm not going to invest my dollar in an idea that hasn't been proven, but I'm willing to let you come and experiment with me and have access to the problem and then try out the solution. And if it works, you have a working prototype that you can then go monetize and buy. I, on the other hand, have learned something along the way. And if I like the solution, I'm going to buy it too. And those are some of the ways I would encourage the listeners to think about how to break into the global market.
Okay, Armen?
Sure, I'll very much resonated with Ashish's commentary. And as a special question, Tom, I'll convey to the listeners here one of the telltale questions I use to assess a startup. Mm-hmm. And so I always make a point of asking to the founder and the founding team, how do you feel about serving a market segment? And the language is quite particular because I'm looking for any contempt, disdain, confusion, because the reality is the majority of founders launch companies because one, they cannot, or they do not like to work at a large company. Mm-hmm. And this is sort of like two negatives don't actually make a positive. Like, that's fine. That happens. But you also need to be in the startup to make a difference for the world, for your customers. So it's not about you as the founder. Right. And the reason I'm highlighting that not as a fuzzy, warm feeling is that if you actually believe that, you will be more successful. And that realization sometimes takes a pummeling from the market or other rough startup lessons, but it really comes back to the glorious thing in terms of building something new and making a difference for the world. So
I love it. That is beautiful.
Thank you.
So on that beautiful note, we will wrap up. Nothing more to be said. Armen, thanks a lot. Ashish, thanks a lot. If you are in the one-to-one meetings, we've clustered them together. So I know a few guys have asked you all for meetings, so please do that. And otherwise, I appreciate you guys very much your time today. We've got 2 more panels for US, and stick around. Otherwise, we are off of this panel and switching the technology guys right now over to our next panel. Thank you
for having us, Tom.
Thanks, guys. Thank you.